Alright, so this will be a lab on rendering. What we need to do is, I have this little animation of a bouncing ball I've done in a different video. So it just bounces up and down, nothing fancy. And what I want to do is, when I want to decide I want to render something, I want to make sure that I check my render settings. But first of all, I want to make sure that I like my camera angle and my shot selection and my staging and things like that. And you want to double check like your lighting and all that you're really happy with it, because if you do a batch render of, let's say, a few hundred frames or something, and there's something you don't like, and you can't fix it in compositing or whatever, you're gonna have to go back and re-render the entire thing, which takes up a lot of time and a lot of computing on your hardware. So it's always nice to be able to just sort of like set it and forget it. Heard that on a cooking show. So anyway, I want to go to Create Camera, and I'm just going to go ahead and adjust my camera to be in a position that I like it. And I'm going to go to Panels, Layouts, 2 panes side by side, because I want to be able to have my perspective view here, but my actual view of my camera here. Other thing I want to do is, in my camera view, this isn't an accurate representation of what the camera's seeing. So go to View, Camera Settings, and Resolution Gate. Now we see this resolution gate here, and it says 640 by 480. It's a rather low resolution. So let's go ahead and see how we can fix that. And while we're at it, we'll go ahead and adjust everything else as well in the render settings. And we'll get it ready for a batch render. So go make sure you're in your rendering tab over here. Go to Render and Render Settings. And let's go ahead and start changing around some of these settings. I'm going to render using Mental Ray. Mental Ray is found, you have to, for 2016 version of Maya, you have to download it from the Autodesk website. It used to come by default. You would just have to go to your Windows Setting Preferences Plugin Manager, and it would be located in here under Maya to MR, MR being Mental Ray, and then just make sure it's loaded, and it would be located in here in every other version except this one without downloading it and installing it. So just make sure you go ahead and do that. Now I'm going to hit close, and now I'm going to go back to my render settings now that I've covered that. In here we need to make sure that we change a number of things. First off, my image format, I'm going to just go with your standard JPEG. I'm not going to change my compression quality, compression meaning we're going to make it a smaller file, and it's just something that we'll ignore for now for this little demo. We're only doing a small render here. The other thing is name, number. We want to change our frame animation extension to name number dot extension. So name, now you'll see these extra attributes here that come listed here. These are just sort of examples, and it goes from frame 1 to 10. So ball bounce render lab 1.jpg, and this is how it'll be saved out in order. Now the one thing you don't like about this is that once it goes through, we need to make sure that we've got some zeros in here, so this is read differently, so our files don't get sort of scrambled in the mix. So it'll go 1 and then 10 and then 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 11, and so on and so forth. So we need to make sure that we adjust what is called the frame padding. So if you notice here, I'm going to slide my frame padding up. Now I'm at 2, meaning 1 0 and then 1 number there. So now I'm going to adjust it to be 3, and now I get an extra number here. So just to be safe, I'm going to give myself 4 or 5. It's really important to make sure you have frame padding. In this case, 5 is overdoing it. I probably only need about 3 because I'm only going to frame 24. But just in case, you always want to be safe. It's better to be safe than sorry. So our start frame will be 1. Our end frame right here in our frame range tab will be 24. And by frame, meaning it'll render out each frame by 1 frame each. So frame 1 will be rendered, frame 2 will be rendered, frame 3 will be rendered, and so on and so forth. Let's go ahead and scrub down. The skip existing frames and renumber frames, this will only get you confused. So we'll stay away from that. We don't need to worry about that at the moment. Renderable camera. This is very important. So this is my perspective view. I don't want to render from my perspective view, I want to render from my camera. So what do? I click on this down arrow tab and go to camera 1. Now I will be rendering out from there. My alpha channel mask, it's checked. Depth channel Z depth is unchecked. These are things we don't need to worry about. This is extra settings, and it's just probably going to be too confusing at the moment for you. So let's just jump down to the core of how to render things. So presets, this is your image size. You can change this manually. I'm going to go ahead and show you. I want to HD 540 will be a width of 960 by 540. And you'll see it says here preset HD 540. If I change it from 1280 to 720, it'll change the preset to HD 720 because that's the actual preset for that resolution. So I like to render out at a 16 by 9 aspect ratio and with a resolution of 1280 by 720. And this is pretty much bare minimum requirements by today. Basically, with all the high-res Blu-ray disc and 4K TVs and IMAX theaters and so on and so forth, and even the resolution of the computer monitors and mobile devices are increasing drastically. So this I would call a bare minimum by today's standards, 1280 by 720 at a 16 by 9 aspect ratio. So now this is pretty much all good. Scene assembly, don't need to worry about that for now. Active representation, that's good. And render options, we're not going to need to worry about at the moment either. This is just Mel is a Mel script, which is the scripting menu down here. We're not going to worry about that at the moment. Now under quality, there's only this is overall quality. You could raise these settings. For this particular render, I'm not going to touch any of these, but if you wanted to have show advanced settings, overall quality, advanced overall sampling, and lighting quality and lighting sampling and things like that. A lot of these will just sort of take longer as you increase it because it'll gather more samples while rendering to get a more accurate portrayal of how the light is bouncing and kind of fading out as it travels over distance. And that's depending on how you set up your lights in the scene. In scene, the only things I'm going to worry about here, I'm not going to worry about any of this information at the moment. I'm not too worried about it. The only thing I do want to have is a light. So in this case, just because it's simple and I don't have to mess around with any of creating lights and kind of get the 3-point lighting scheme down, I'm just going to make this an outside or outdoor scene and just do create on image-based lighting and physical sun and sky. I'm going to hit create as well. And I'm going to just run over these. We're not going to worry about the configuration or diagnostics, and we're going to go ahead and hit close. Now in here, what we're going to do is, now that we've got the resolution, you see how it's changed from 640 by 480, I believe it said earlier. Now it's 1280 by 720, and the size of this box has changed. So now we have a widescreen format resolution. So I'm going to go ahead and just set this to be adjusted so that when I go through and I play it, I like my overall look. So from this point, I'm going to select my camera. I'm going to go to my channel box, and I'm just going to go ahead and lock and hide these. I'm not going to hide them actually. I'm just going to lock these settings because I like where my camera is. And now if I wanted to, I can't move it at all, which is really good because I don't want it to mess anything up. The other thing is always a good idea to do is check your lighting on the scene. So that would be 7. And you'll notice that if I select this here, this is the sun direction. I can go ahead and change the lighting on it. So I'm just going to put it on a slight angle, so we'll probably get some shadow over here when we render. It's always a good idea to also run just a quick test render of a still frame just to make sure. And in order to do that, under your rendering tab, go to render. And I'm overall pleased with all the settings I've changed so far. So just to check before I run a batch render, I can run a render current frame. And this will pop up. And it's going to render. And there it is. So there's what my scene's looking like so far. Now, I'm pleased with the overall look. I'm going to set my project so that I'm able to render all of these images into a single folder that that's easy for me to find, and it's like sort of where my project folder is. So this goes over how to set your project folder as well. If I go to File, Set Project, I'm going to go to my desktop and this new folder, rename Render Lab, and I'm going to go in here, double click on it. Now I'm in my render lab, and I'm just going to hit set. You're just setting the folder where you're rendering to, and then just hit create default workspace. So now I'm going to go ahead and just test this really quickly. Always a good idea to double check your settings, because what if I accidentally hit 240 on my end render and instead of 24? So that's always a great idea to check, double check. It's safety first, basically. Better safe than sorry. If you walk away from a computer and it's been rendering for 12 hours, that takes a toll on your computer over time. So start frame 1, end frame 24, and it looks like we're ready to go. We got the name, number, extension. Everything looks good up here, and I'm going to go ahead and hit close. Now I can go ahead and go to render and batch render. And you see here it says result, and it's starting to render. So I'm going to let those render out. It's going fairly quickly. It's only 24 frames. And I have those settings basically by default. They were low. And once this finishes, I'll have my rendered animation. Now, while this is rendering, the machine I'm using is a very good machine, so I should be able to open up either After Effects or Premiere. I'll open up Premiere, I guess. I generally would use